Hi, I'm Alane Freund. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and an international consultant on high sensitivity. And I do these twice a month webinars, one for parents and one around general issues for highly sensitive people. In our last parenting webinar, I promised that I would invite my highly sensitive young son here. He's 19 years old and a young adult. And probably about a decade ago, I told him that he was highly sensitive and he didn't take kindly to it. So I just wanted to and this is Asher. Asher, you are sensitive, and you've come to realize that in some ways that you are, but you don't really love the term highly sensitive person. Can you tell me about some of your reactions as a young man, as a teenager and a preteen?
Well, I think when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, and that's when you were when you first got exposed to the science and the research on high sensitivity, I was probably at a developmental stage where I was a little bit rebellious and a little bit scornful of most things really that were introduced to me by my elders. So at that time, I think it was more just a matter of where I was developmentally that I didn't take to the term, that I didn't adopt the identity of being a highly sensitive person. And I think to some degree now, in some ways that hasn't changed, but in other ways, the way that I see it for myself is that I am who I am. And I have learned over time, and with my mom's help too, that I need to live my life in a certain way in order to be successful, in order to realize the goals that I want to realize, and in order to be happy and at peace. And I think that many aspects of my personality would align with the high sensitivity trait. And whether the label of being a highly sensitive person is useful for me, that's my own journey. But yes, certainly, yeah.
What do you think about when I say, instead you could just say you have a highly reactive brain or a more reactive brain? Does that resonate for you?
Certainly.
You notice that that's true in class?
Yeah, I mean, just relative to my peers, I've always struggled more so with getting overwhelmed and overstimulating situations, with needing time in solitude, with becoming overstimulated in loud and abrasive situations. Yeah. And I've also gotten into a lot of conflict with my teachers over the years, which I think has gotten me pinned as just a bad student or a misbehaving kid in a lot of situations, where in reality there were subtler and more complex causes and conditions that were related to my sensitivity, that weren't recognized by my teachers and the school that I was in.
And yet, a lot of times you got these amazing reviews or written up narratives from your teachers about how much they appreciated you, while recognizing some of the ways that you were maybe a challenge in class.
Definitely. I mean,
but tell me, tell us, what are a couple of things that you did to survive high school with this more reactive brain and finely tuned nervous system?
Yeah, well, I mean, just to speak to the first thing you said, especially starting in middle school and going into high school, my narrative comments from teachers would be incredibly mixed, and they'd be mixed in a very extreme and polarized way, where many teachers would have not only would there be positive and negative evaluations from different teachers, but also even the same teachers would give me feedback that was at once very high praise and at the same time sharp criticism, because I wasn't a perfect student. Sometimes I would stand up and yell in class. Sometimes I would get into arguments with the teacher. Sometimes I wouldn't listen for an entire class period, or be talking to a friend, or completely distracted. But then at other times I would be in the class with really deep investment, and I would demonstrate passion, and I would think deeply about the material. So that's, I think, what got me those kinds of mixed evaluations in middle school and high school, where teachers simultaneously appreciated me and were sometimes exasperated by me.
And how did you use this finely tuned nervous system and more reactive brain? What were your strategies to survive high school? So just maybe one or two.
So I think somebody, one of my counselors or a therapist or somebody, told me introduced to me the concept of triage. And now I'm an EMT, and I know a lot about triage and its literal applications. But at the time it was a figurative thing, and it was like, figure out what projects, what homework are absolutely necessary, and then devote your whole attention and your whole mind and heart to that project or that homework. So what I could start to do was I could start to say, this is something that I can just sort of breeze through and not worry about, or maybe not even do entirely, because you don't have to do every little thing in school. And then here is an essay, for example, say for example that really matters. Um, and if I could say this really matters and this is something I care about, then I would do it to the utmost of my ability, and I would do it really well, because I would get incredibly involved, and I would often work, many hours longer than I was expected to. I remember I had a science project in my freshman year of high school, where I was doing a project in the biology lab, and I spent, I mean, the maximum was I think 12 hours. I spent easily 25 hours on it, because I really cared about the research I was doing. And but the thing is, it's not a decision I make. It's like if it's almost a duality. If I decide to do something, I do it really deeply, but I can also decide, so I can use that knowledge of myself to choose what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do. And then the things that I do will come out really good.
And, in the end, that was an amazing project, and, really well received by the evaluators. And I wonder, sometimes all that time that you put on those things, other things in your life might be sacrificed, right? And then you have to prioritize because you're going so deeply into those projects.
So yeah, exactly. And rather than lower the quality of the work that I did, and rather than invest myself less, be less passionate about my work, I just had to pare down the amount of things that I was doing.
Yeah. Okay. So just last question. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today. I know it's going to help lots of parents and teachers out there, maybe other young people. I think what I'd like to ask you is, what advice would you have for parents and teachers when they encounter teens who have this more in-tuned way of living in the world? How can they support them without being so intrusive like I am? It's hard to have a therapist for a mom.
So one thing that I struggled with a lot in high school, and there's one teacher that I'm thinking of in particular, a math teacher, was people who were inflexible in their systems and standards. So I had one teacher who was really strict about the way we would do homework and what homework we would do, and I ended up just not doing a lot of the homework, which hurt my grade, and also I think hurt my comprehension, my learning of the material. So what helped me a lot, in contrast, and many teachers did this for me, was when they would actually sit down with me for half an hour or an hour and hear my perspective and hear what was going on in my own mind, and then create just like an informal independent learning plan. Like I didn't need an educational counselor or anything like that. I just needed a teacher to sit down with me for a few minutes and and maybe just like tweak the way things worked a little bit. Like I had my math teacher the next year actually was much more understanding and much more accommodating. And he said, why don't you do the last 3 problems on the assignment instead of the whole thing? Because they're the hardest ones. So if you can do those 3, you're fine. And you don't have to sit there for 2 hours doing all of the busy work, because I didn't need to, because I understood the material. And I would learn better by being challenged on a few problems than sitting there and doing 15 problems that would just make me feel overwhelmed, and that felt really tedious and would lead me to have stress attacks. So that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I want to make a point of clarification about that. Because you think so much, because you process so deeply, you were spending tons of time on those problems.
I work slowly.
That were easy. Yeah. And when you work more deeply, it takes more time. And so you would be spending so much time on those problems that to do them correctly, but were actually easy for you. And so that was amazing. Can we just call out that teacher's name? Was that Mr. Ryder?
Dave Ryder.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave Ryder. So I hope you can find a Dave Ryder in your child's life, in your young man's life, your young teen's life. And, and then let's help tell them, would you say this is true, Asher, that you have to go find those teachers and make those things happen for you in college yourself, right?
Yeah.
You really, you got to go to a school where there was a lot of individual attention. Not every teacher was perfect, but a lot of people were invested in trying to treat each student as an individual. So don't get lost in your big high school or in your big university. Adults love when young people talk to them, and teachers and professors love. I mean, I think you showed me a letter from a professor at college that you got recently, how much they appreciated how careful you were and how much work you did. and that they were happy to answer your questions. And so,
And I would just add one small
please.
thing on that note. If you are a high schooler right now, and you feel overwhelmed and invisible by, in the context of high school, um, you know, this might be specific to my experience, but I think college will be better. Like college is more set up for highly sensitive people, um, and it's just like a lot. Like I found that many of the things that many of the like the causes for like stress and anxiety and depression in my life just simply vanished when I got to college, because it's a system that's much more open and much more individual, and that fosters and appreciates freedom and free thinking a lot more. So just stick in there, stick with it, and college might be cool.
I mean, that might be true of any way that you're unique or different. It's just such a, my mentor, Elaine Aaron, always says high school is the last time you're forced to be with people that you don't want to be with for extended periods of time. You get to make your own choices after that. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here and talking to us. And I know lots of people do. So if you have questions for me or for Asher, you can put them in the comments and I'll go to Asher and ask his answers if they're for him and put them back in there. So thanks for being here. Let's see if we can stop this recording.